Jason Kelsey has seen enough from broken locker rooms to recognize when a franchise is spiraling, and lately, the Browns' quarterback strategy is looking dangerously familiar. Rotating decisions, hasty calls, shallow depth. He's called out directly. Now, when Shedeur Sanders enters a conversation, the contrast is glaring. A young QB showing discipline, growth, and command, yet caught in a media firestorm that treats narrative louder than nuance. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Kelsey's plea for merit-based evaluation isn't just theory. It's rooted in decades of what does and doesn't work in building team stability. This raises a fundamental issue. How do we actually assess quarterback potential? When someone like Sanders displays consistency in pressure reads, practice leadership and decision-making, but still gets dismissed because of name recognition or media biases, it calls the entire scouting process into question. The shift Kelsey demands isn't just for Sanders. It's a broader call for patience, logic, and depth-first thinking in a sport increasingly driven by headlines over hard facts. The whispers start like they always do, vague tweets, shady quotes, and sideline glances caught at the wrong moment. But this time, it wasn't speculation from anonymous sources or secondhand hearsay. It was a leaked audio clip from Shannon Sharpe, confirming what many feared and others flat out denied. Shedeur Sanders is quitting the Browns. That sentence alone is enough to rattle an entire fan base. Not because Shedeur hasn't earned respect. He has. But because his rise was fast, scrutinized, and polarizing from the beginning. The leak felt like a sucker punch, especially coming off weeks of conflicting narratives. Some called him overhyped. Others said he was the Browns' best shot at stability. And now he's stepping away? Let's rewind. Shedeur Sanders didn't just arrive in the NFL. He blasted in under the weight of his last name and every expectation that came with it. From day one, critics were lined up to say he was a product of hype, that his NFL shot was more about Deion Sanders than it was about him. The word nepotism followed him like a shadow, louder than his actual stat lines. But the numbers told a different story. Practice reports consistently noted his composure, footwork, and ability to read defenses with increasing sharpness. Every week, he grew more confident. The footage didn't lie. His pocket movement, his throws under pressure, his timing on intermediate routes, they were there. So why was the doubt louder than because people love a narrative? And the one that stuck to Shedeur was that he was unproven, unearned, and over-promoted. But if you actually watched the games, you'd see a player who was climbing, not coasting. His performance metrics improved steadily. He was consistent under duress, a trait that separates real quarterbacks from training camp mascots. And it wasn't just mechanics. It was leadership. Coaches and teammates pointed to his communication on the field, his work ethic behind the scenes, and his ability to stay locked in during chaotic moments. Whether it was preseason, midseason, or high-pressure scenarios, Shedeur didn't crumble. He adjusted. He led. So when Shannon Sharpe, of all people, dropped that audio, it hit differently. Shannon's not some loudmouth guessing on social media. He's a former pro who's watched enough tape to know the difference between potential and fluff. In the clip, Shannon wasn't speculating. He was stating, Shedeur is done with the Browns. No drama. No PR spin. Just facts. And the wild part? Shannon also went on the media's role in all of this. He called out the lazy commentary, the biased coverage, and the way critics clung to outdated stereotypes instead of acknowledging Sanders' actual progress. He broke down tape. He cited stats. He dismantled the narrative with surgical precision. The Browns, for their part, weren't exactly helping their own case. The quarterback situation in Cleveland has been chaos for years, mismanagement, injuries, and short-term thinking. This season was no different. Between Deshaun Watson's ongoing health issues and the carousel of backups, Shedeur stepping up should have been a stabilizing move. Instead, the organization sent mixed signals. One week, Sanders was the future. The next, there were whispers of going back to the trade market. The indecision became a headline itself. Fans didn't know who to believe, and the locker room vibe reflected that. Add in mounting losses, and the pressure hit critical levels. Rich Eisen didn't hold back either. In a that's now circulating across sports media, he torched the Browns for failing to trust their own development pipeline. He pointed out how Shedeur's game footage stood up against far more seasoned QBs. Rich emphasized that this wasn't about hype, it was about results, and the Browns were squandering them. He urged Cleveland's leadership to look beyond narratives and see the clear, factual evidence in front of them. Eisen stressed that when a quarterback improves week by week under real game pressure, it means something. That progress doesn't come from nepotism. It comes from preparation, from hours in the film room, from resilience. Then Jason Kelce chimed in. And when one of the most respected voices in football starts talking, people listen. Kelce, never one to sugarcoat things, criticized the Browns' revolving door of quarterbacks. He said what a lot of fans were thinking. You can't build anything stable when your game plan changes with the wind. Kelce praised Sanders' poise and noted that the kid was doing more with less, working behind a shaky line with inconsistent play calling and still delivering smart, composed performances. He didn't call Shedeur perfect, but he made it clear. The issues in Cleveland weren't coming from QB1. They were coming from up top. And speaking of up top, Kevin Stefanski's handling of the situation didn't help. Publicly, Stefanski stayed measured, praising Sanders when necessary, downplaying drama where possible. But internally, reports hinted at tension, coaching indecision, unclear development paths, and poor communication only made things worse. This lack of direction echoed the Browns' broader organizational flaws. Stefanski was juggling too many narratives, not enough vision. Instead of anchoring the team around a promising young QB, it felt like leadership was hedging, keeping one foot in every possible scenario and ultimately committing to none. That's not strategy. That's fear. On top of all this, there was a medical scare. Sanders went down mid-season with a back injury that, while not career-threatening, raised alarm bells. He missed practices, sat out games, and the whispers got louder. Injury-prone. Not durable. Maybe he's not cut out for the league. All that talk, despite the fact that his recovery was on track. But recovery didn't matter in a media environment addicted to hot takes. Sanders took the high road. No outbursts, no drama. He stayed visible on the sideline, stayed involved with the team, and when he returned to practice, looked sharper than expected. Still, the label stuck. In the NFL, perception always runs faster than truth. Behind the scenes, things came to a head. Meetings between Sanders and Stefanski reportedly grew tense. Whether it was about game planning expectations or long-term vision, there was a disconnect. Shedeur, always outspoken yet measured, wasn't seeing a future in Cleveland. Not under this leadership. Not in this environment. And now the leak confirms it. Shannon's audio didn't just reveal Sanders' plans. It exposed how unstable the Browns had become, and how even their most promising prospect couldn't see a clear path forward. The cycle continues. Another young quarterback, another opportunity lost to mismanagement, mistrust, and media noise. The saddest part of all this, it didn't have to end like this. If you roll the tapes, literally, there's more than enough to make the case for Sanders as a long-term starter. His preseason games alone showed flashes of what analysts love to call NFL readiness. Tight throws, smart reads, a calm pocket presence. He had the intangibles, and he was building on them week after week. And he wasn't just executing plays. He was adjusting protections, changing calls, leading 2-minute drills. Coaches praised his maturity in private, even if they didn't back him publicly. But in a franchise that's allergic to consistency, even progress feels like a liability. Shedeur has never asked for a pass. Every interview, every press moment, he's been measured, focused, direct. He's talked about preparation, accountability, and proving himself through performance, not his last name. And yet, somehow, everything he said was twisted into arrogance or entitlement. Why? Because it's easier for the media machine to paint him as the flashy kid who got handed a job than to admit they misjudged a serious talent. Because when you're confident and come from a famous family, the world waits for you to trip. And the second you do, even if it's just a back injury, they frame the fall like it was inevitable. That's the part Shannon Sharpe made brutally clear. In a follow-up to the leak clip, he didn't just talk about Sanders quitting, he explained why. And it wasn't because of ego. It was because he didn't see growth around him. He saw chaos. No protection from the line. No consistency from the coaching staff. No faith from a franchise. And Sharpe called out the hypocrisy. The same people who accused Shedeur of being overhyped weren't holding the front office accountable for blowing draft picks, mismanaging veteran talent, or playing quarterback roulette year after year. It was deflection, plain and simple. Then Stephen A. Smith entered the chat. Loud? Yes. But wrong? Not this time. He backed Sanders emphatically, emphasizing that people weren't evaluating the tape. They were evaluating the name. He pointed out the double standard, how other young quarterbacks got time to develop, grow, stumble, and still stayed in the conversation as promising. But for Shedeur, one setback, one questionable press comment, and he was a bust? It didn't make sense. Stephen A. reminded everyone that the game is about production, not perception. And Sanders had produced. He held his own in a system that didn't support him, against teams built to pressure and expose. After one of his strongest preseason games, Shedeur gave a calm but clear post-game interview. He talked about reads, adjustments, areas of improvement. He didn't brag. He didn't deflect. He showed the kind of self-awareness you want in a franchise quarterback. Coaches praised it. Analysts praised it. But it got buried under the same recycled takes. And when he got injured, that narrative drowned everything else. Suddenly, none of the tape mattered. None of the intangibles mattered. The discourse became about durability, not data. Even though the injury wasn't serious, the noise was, and it never stopped. By the time things broke down between Sanders and Stefanski, it wasn't just about football anymore. It was about vision or the lack of one. Sanders reportedly asked for clarity. Where did he stand? Was he the future or just a placeholder? Stefanski couldn't give a straight answer. And that silence said everything. At some point, it stops being about patience and starts being about respect. And if you've shown you can lead, improve, and stay composed through adversity, and your organization still won't commit, that's not your failure. That's theirs. And Shedeur wasn't willing to wait for the Browns to figure that out. In practices, Sanders was known for staying late, watching extra film, running extra drills. That stuff doesn't make headlines, but it matters. Veteran players saw it. Some even commented anonymously about how he carried himself like a seasoned pro, not a flashy rookie. But the problem was never effort. It was direction. You can grind all you want, but if the people above you don't know what they're building, or worse, don't care, you hit a wall. And that wall is what Sanders ran into. Not with his body. With the Browns' matchup against the Raiders was supposed to be a turning point. Instead, it turned into a cautionary tale. Sanders got a chance late in the game after another QB went down. And he looked ready, sharp throws, poised under pressure. But the play calling? Inconsistent. The protection? Non-existent. He took hit after hit. Still got the ball out. Still moved the chains. But instead of momentum, the conversation afterward became about whether he was tough enough, not whether the Browns gave him anything to work with. The narrative once again missed the mark. Even Myles Garrett weighed in during a locker room interview. Without naming names, he made it clear that some players were stepping up while others weren't being put in a position to succeed. He talked about frustration, about wasted talent, about the need for accountability at all levels of the franchise. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots. Garrett has been through enough seasons in Cleveland to know the signs of another collapse. And when even the team's most respected voice is sounding the alarm, something's seriously broken. The Vikings game ended up being Shedeur's unofficial farewell. He didn't play, still sidelined, recovering, but the atmosphere said everything. Tension on the sideline, confusion on the field, zero cohesion. The Browns lost badly. And after the final whistle, Sanders didn't linger. Sources said he didn't even return to the locker room right away. He watched, he processed, and he was standing on the sideline, not in pads, not in command, just watching. Shedeur Sanders had gone from the Browns' brightest hope to a symbol of everything they couldn't get right. You could see it on his face. The frustration, the silence, the full awareness that he'd done everything he could, and it still wasn't enough to shift the tide in Cleveland. They said he lacked toughness. But there he stood, hurt, sidelined, still present for the team. They said he was immature. But there he was, composed, focused, despite being forced out of the very position he'd worked for. The contradictions piled up, and yet the narrative stayed the same. Because when people decide what story they want to tell, facts become optional. Sanders didn't go public. He didn't throw a tantrum. He didn't tweet a thank you, Cleveland message laced with passive aggression. Instead, he kept showing up. He kept speaking with calmness in post-practice scrums, answering tough questions with short, thoughtful answers. His message was always the same: I just want to play. But play what exactly? The Browns weren't giving him real reps. Not after the injury. Not with the noise growing louder. And not with their habit of rotating quarterbacks like seasonal staff. So Sanders kept showing up, but his opportunity wasn't. And the silence from management? That was louder than anything he could have said. When asked directly after the Vikings game about Sanders' future, Kevin Stefanski gave a masterclass in vagueness. We're evaluating week to week. He's a big part of this team. We're confident in all our quarterbacks. The kind of answers that say nothing while pretending to say everything. Stefanski had praised Sanders earlier in the year, called him a student of the game, a pro already, poised. So what changed? The performances didn't fall off. The locker room respected him. The fans were split but intrigued. So what happened behind the scenes that made the franchise pull back from the one guy showing long-term across his short run with the Browns? The tape tells a different story than the headlines. You see a player growing into the speed of the NFL, not overwhelmed, not reckless, just adjusting week after week, rep after rep. You see clean reads, safe decisions, smart movement in the pocket. No, he wasn't perfect, but for a rookie, he was ahead of schedule. His throws weren't desperate. His mistakes weren't repeated. And when protection broke down, he still looked for the play instead of the sideline. That's what development looks like. And it's what Cleveland ignored, chasing short-term Band-Aids instead of long-term solutions. Look back at this season for the Browns, and you'll find the same pattern they've been stuck in for years. A rotating cast of quarterbacks. A head coach playing PR games. A front office afraid to pick a direction and commit. One week it was about building. The next it was about win now. Every week the messaging changed. They benched quarterbacks too early. They kept injured players in too long. They sent out press releases saying all the right things, but their decisions never matched their words. Sanders was just the latest casualty of that cycle. A young player caught in the churn of a team that keeps hitting reset before anything has a chance to grow. Jason Kelce said it best. It's not about talent. It's about development. He didn't name Shedeur, but he didn't have to. The NFL is full of talented players who never become stars, not because they can't play, but because they're dropped into chaotic systems, then blamed when those systems implode. Kelce talked about the need for organizational vision, a structure, a path. Quarterbacks aren't magic, they're shaped, he said. And Cleveland never gave Shedeur the environment to be shaped. They expected instant greatness without the infrastructure to support it. Rich Eisen echoed that point, diving into the Browns' draft history and free agency moves over the past 3 years. You can't be surprised when this happens, he said. You build a quarterback graveyard, and now you're shocked another one's leaving? He laid out the receipts. Failed picks, inconsistent coaching hires, bad roster fits. And then he asked a question no one in the organization seems willing to answer. What's the actual plan? Not for this season, for the franchise. Because if you can't answer that, you have no business drafting quarterbacks, let alone judging ones who've actually delivered under pressure. Shannon Sharpe doubled down, too. He didn't just blame the Browns. He blamed the culture, the he's not ready crowd, the he's Dion's son, that's why he's here noise, the refusal to let Shedeur just be a football player instead of the storyline. Y'all never gave that kid a fair shot, he said. You wanted him to fail. And when he didn't, you made it about something else. Shannon called it for what it was. coded language, expectations rooted in stereotypes, and a refusal to judge based on merit. You let the media narrative drive the decision-making, and now you've lost one of the smartest young quarterbacks in the league. He didn't sugarcoat it, and he didn't have to. It's jarring watching the preseason footage now. Sanders on the sideline, high-fiving teammates, headset on, talking through plays with position coaches. At that point, there was a sense of momentum. The team looked invested. The staff looked focused. Sanders looked locked in. No one watching that footage would guess what was about to unfold. But that's Cleveland. Momentum disappears in a week. Belief fades after one injury. And faith in young players is conditional. Granted, only if the media says it okay. And Shedeur? He's quiet for now. No social posts. No big statements. Just silence. But that silence is a lot. It says he's done trying to explain himself to people who never listened. It says he's seen enough to know when it's time to move on. And above all, it says he still believes in his own future, even if the Browns never did. Because the truth is, Shedeur Sanders doesn't need Cleveland. But Cleveland desperately needed someone like him. And they blew it. So where does that leave everything? A talented quarterback exits without a public feud, without a tantrum, without demanding headlines, and still ends up being framed as a problem. Shedeur Sanders showed up, suited up, and played smarter than half the guys the Browns cycled through in the last 5 years. And yet, he's the one walking away like it was his fault. It's a familiar story, isn't it? Especially for black quarterbacks. Confidence becomes arrogance. Poise gets reframed as entitlement. And any connection to fame, whether it's bloodline or brand, gets used as ammo instead of context. What happened to evaluating players by what they do on the field? If that were the standard, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be talking about how a young quarterback adapted to a broken system, elevated what Lilly had, and still walked off with dignity. We'd be talking about his growth, his accuracy, his reads under pressure. But those clips, they got buried under the noise. So here's the reality. Shedeur Sanders didn't quit the Browns. The Browns quit building around him. They backed out before the story had a chance to take shape. And now, they're back to square one, again. And you're caught watching it all unfold, wondering how many more times this team is going to hit the reset button before they realize they keep throwing away the answer. Hit the like if you're tired of the same old quarterback circus in Cleveland. Drop a comment if you think Shedeur deserves better. And don't forget to subscribe. We're not done unraveling this mess yet.